Right, we're back. Mr. Steen, we're back on.
I'm retrieving my laptop. So I'm very grateful for the opportunity to make an application on behalf of the client group that I represent to ask a question or have counsel to the inquiry ask a question in relation to, of Lord Clarke. The topic area that we will be seeking to have the question put forward is as follows: that many of the infected and affected people who I represent have strong views as to what Lord Clarke has said and the way that he has presented himself before this inquiry. And therefore we are instructed and asked to raise with you so that you can consider this application to ask Lord Clarke for his comment on the following: that Lord Clarke has presented himself in a way that has shown arrogance, pomposity.
I think the way you put it before, so that those who are watching know that this is second run through the same submission, it's been allowed to be repeated because those online were unable to see it. In an abundance of caution, the live stream was switched off. Those may now know that the submission was made, and the question which you invited me to consider should be put to Lord Clarke was in these terms.
Yes, sir.
That many people found him to be arrogant, pompous, and contemptuous of people who had suffered so much in this scandal, and therefore seek his comment on whether he agrees with that description.
Yes, sir. We do ask that. The reasons why we suggest that it is important for this inquiry to hear the question as to the way that he has presented himself is so that you can understand and can consider his comment on that question. That will assist you in looking at his credibility as to the way that he has put himself before this inquiry, the answers that he has given before this inquiry, whether this is an individual who is capable of insight in the way that he has handled matters that connect to this inquiry, and finally, on a point that's been raised to me, whether this individual, Lord Clarke, has contributed because of the way his thoughts and presentation to the delays in considering this matter before a public inquiry. In other words, does Lord Clarke understand that his attitudes potentially have contributed to the lengthening of accountability before this inquiry?
Thank you.
So, as you said, this is a repeat, essentially, of our earlier application that, for technical reasons, wasn't broadcast.
Thank you. Just before we realised that the live stream wasn't working, I'd invited Miss Gray on behalf of Lord Clarke as his legal representative, this being heard in his absence, to respond to the application. Miss Gray.
So thank you very much for that opportunity. As you and indeed everyone in this room will appreciate, I'm in a slightly difficult position because I do not have and have not sought Lord Clarke's own instructions on this matter. In the light of that, I'm going to confine my comments to really making two propositions, or putting before you two propositions for your consideration. The first, very shortly, is simply that Lord Clarke is being asked to comment on how others perceive him. And the second is that it would normally be a matter for you, as chair, to assess directly, having of course heard from Mr. Clarke at length, his presentation and how that may affect his evidence. And of course, arising out of that, I would simply invite you to reflect on the extent to which Mr. Steen's suggested question, whether asked by him or by Ms. Richards, will assist you in coming to conclusions on the matters relevant to your terms of reference. I'd invite you to reflect on those matters, sir, but I don't make any further submissions one way or the other. I will leave it to the inquiry to determine this application, of course having heard, if you think it fit, from counsel to the inquiry first.
Thank you.
it's really very much a matter for you as to whether you would be assisted by having the question asked and answered. On the one hand, it could be said that it's a submission, and a submission that might be made to you in due course. On the other, it could be said that by putting the matter to Lord Clarke at this stage, it allows him to respond to it now rather than potentially further down the line through the Rule 13 criticism process. It's very much, however, a matter for you as to whether you would be assisted by having his answer to it. If you are, then I have no objection whatsoever to asking the question myself, but it was because it was an unusual question and one which is based upon a particular set of instructions from a group of core participants that it seemed proper that it was an application made by Mr. Steen. But if you want to hear the question and answer, and I do understand entirely why Mr. Steen's clients have articulated their position to him in the way that they have, then it's a question that can be put by me or by Mr. Steen or indeed by you. It's really very much whether you want to hear the answer, sir.
Thank you. Anything more, Mr. Steen?
Sir, only this, that inquiries have a much wider remit than simply the terms of reference. They are there to also consider publicly whether those groups that have been wronged have been able to have their grievances properly aired. There is a wider purpose than simply getting to the truth. And I agree with my learned friend Miss Richards that here we have a situation whereby we would be seeking at a later stage to make these submissions about the presentation of Lord Clarke before this inquiry. And so in that sense, it seems fair to both those who I represent and also arguably to Lord Clarke that this be put before him now for his comment and for his answer.
Thank you.
Other than that, I have nothing further, unless, of course, I can assist.
No, thank you. I have been faced with an application, the basis for which I shall simply say I well understand, that the following question should be put to Lord Clarke: that many people found him to be arrogant, pompous, and contemptuous of people who had suffered so much in this scandal, and therefore seek his comments upon whether he agrees with this description. The question, in its essentials, is whether he agrees that he is arrogant, pompous, and contemptuous of people who have suffered so much. I do not think that his views upon whether his personality is of that nature or not, which is really a matter of perception for those who are looking at him, his own views will assist me one way or the other. It is said they might give some insight. That may be. But I do not think that will help me to resolve the issues. Those who have seen him online in this inquiry will form their own views as to what I should make of him. I hope you will trust me to be able to make my own assessment. Part of the job of this inquiry in working out what happened and why is to look at all the evidence from whichever source it comes. And part of that evidence is the identity and character of the individual who is concerned with passages of evidence, passages of time with which this inquiry is concerned. So I've come to the conclusion that I would not be assisted by asking this question. It does not stop those who wish to submit in due course that I should make a specific finding to that effect or should take that into account, their view. In doing so, I will listen to that submission if and when it is made. But I do not think that it is helpful to ask someone if they are arrogant, pompous, and contemptuous of others.
Sir, we've reached the stage then where there are no further questions from me, but of course you may have some questions, and we will afford Lord Clarke the customary courtesy we afford all witnesses of seeing if they have anything that they wish to add.
Yes.
So we will need to pick that up then at 2:10, if that gives enough time for everyone to have lunch. And I'm just
Yes, I hope. Shall we aim for 2:10? If any person is late in coming back, we shall simply delay starting. But I'm not inviting you to take too long over it. But if you can, please, 2:10.